Hey there, Parkside students. So I remember right after my freshman year of high school, I had an opportunity to go on a mission trip, and I actually went on a couple that summer, but one of the ones that I went on was to New York City. Now, my youth group was really awesome about providing opportunities for us to go on trips, and usually the supervision was great. It was just enough to keep us in line without really restricting us. But for some reason this year, they made a really weird decision. You see, we were staying in this missions housing, this housing available for Christian workers, and we had 2 rooms available for our guys. Now, on this trip, we had 9th graders and 10th graders and a couple of male volunteers, including people like my dad and our youth pastor, who were kind of overseeing us and helping make sure that we stayed in line. And for some reason, we put all the leaders in one room with a couple of students, and they left my class and our one older friend in a room totally by ourselves. Now, this was a terrible idea, but we weren't complaining, so we got to have an entire room to ourselves for that whole week. Now, we had bunk beds in this room. They were kind of old. It was a former hospital, and so it was kind of just a weird setup, but we had these old metal bunk beds, and I remember I was in the corner on one, on the top of one, and then right next to me was my buddy named Jack. Now, Jack was a lot bigger than me, but Jack and I were good friends, and so we'd roughhouse a little bit. I remember one night, I don't even know how we got started on this, but we started throwing stuff at each other. I think we were throwing pillows or socks or dirty underwear or something like that. We were throwing it all over the place. So I had just thrown something at Jack, and then I looked back over to this side of the room and I threw something at one of my friends, and when I looked back, all 180 pounds of my buddy Jack was flying through the air at me, and he had jumped from his bunk bed to mine, and when he did, he shoved me. Now, there was a wall behind me, but there was about a 2 to 3 foot gap between that wall and my bed, so I went flying off my bed, hit the wall. As I slid down the wall, I didn't stop until I found an iron pipe with the back of my head, the wall with one shoulder, and then the bed with my other, and I was stuck. I could not move. You know, as I laid there in that gap, I was completely dazed and confused. I had no idea what was going on. And as I slowly regained the ability to kind of know what was going on and my awareness, what I realized was that I couldn't move. There was no ability for me to move, and it was actually right next to my buddy Michael, who was asleep. And so I started yelling, Michael, 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 help me. Michael's a heavy sleeper, and so the most I got out of him was a little sleep talking, telling me to shut up. And Michael was absolutely no help to me. And so for the next several minutes, I was stuck in the position, and it was really one of the worst feelings on the planet. I don't know if you've ever felt something like that, like you've literally physically been stuck somewhere and you couldn't move. Or more likely in this season right now, you're feeling stuck. You're feeling like you're in a situation where you don't have options, you don't have opportunities, and there's not really much you can do. You've got all this time in the world, but you feel like, because of your circumstances, there's nothing that's really going on with it. You know, there's a character in the Bible who probably could relate with our situation a lot, and that was the Apostle Paul. He actually writes this letter that we're about to dive into, the letter to the Philippian church, while in house arrest, we believe, in Rome. You see, there were people who didn't like the message that Paul was preaching, and as a result of it, he was in prison for that. The dogs are trying to get in and say hi to me. But Paul is stuck where he's at. He can't get out of his house, and for a church planter and missionary, this has got to be terrible for him. You see, Paul was somebody known for living his life in motion, going city to city, going on these journeys, planting churches, teaching in the synagogues. His life was about movement, and that was taken away from him, and he was stuck in a home. Now, it's probably pretty likely that Paul might have experienced some of these feelings that we're feeling. It's probably pretty likely that he was going through some of the same processes as us. And so, as we're in this quarantine season, I thought it would be really appropriate for us to begin to look through the words that he had for his brothers and sisters in the church at Philippi. So we're going to be looking at the letter to the Philippians for the next couple weeks here. So if you have your Bible, go ahead and open up with me, and we're going to start in chapter 1, verse 3 through 11. So go ahead and pause. All right, cool. Welcome back, and we are ready to go in Philippians chapter 1, verse 3 through 11. It says, 3 through 6. It says this: I thank my God every time I remember you. In all my prayers for all of you, I always pray with joy because of your partnership in the gospel from the first day until now, being confident of this, that he who began a good work in you will carry it on to completion until the day of Christ Jesus. Paul begins this by saying, hey, he's filled with joy, which is kind of weird. You know, I've been reflecting on a lot as I have free time during this season of life. And oftentimes as I think on my friends and as I think on my Parkside family, and as I think about y'all, I'm actually a little bit sad. I'm bummed out that we can't spend time together. I'm bummed that we're not able to meet on Tuesday nights. I'm bummed out that we're not able to do all these fun events that we had planned to do together. And it makes me just sad on what we're missing out on. And Paul is in a similar situation where he is stuck and he is not able to leave somewhere, and he is longing to be with them. He wants to be with them. But instead of feeling sad, Paul feels thankful. Paul is filled with joy. Now, how on earth does that work? You know, this is kind of weird. You see, what Paul's joy was based in was not his proximity to his friends, but rather the one that he knew was moving in and through them. You see, because they were partnered together in the mission of God, Paul knew this, and he clearly states this, that because they are partnered together with God, that means that God has begun a work in each of them, a work of sanctifying them, a work of moving and shaping their hearts to look more like Him. And he knows this, that God has promised that those He begins this work in, He will carry to its completion. Paul has a trust in what God is doing. You see, he knows that what God begins, no one can shut down. What God starts in someone, He sees through to the end. You see, this promise is based in His power and in His sufficiency. See, it's His power alone that can cover this, but it's also His power is more than enough to accomplish this. He can do it, and He has just the right amount of power to do it. So if then, this journey of God working on our hearts, of God moving in us, of God shaping us and changing us to look more like Him, if this rises and falls on His power and His power alone, what does that mean for us? It's simple. What we bring to the situation, what we can do, is in the midst of tough circumstances, we can carry on. Now, this is true, and I hope that you know this is true, but can we be real? In the practical day-to-day, it's really hard right now to live out. Like, you get it, okay, yeah, I gotta carry on, but what on earth does that actually mean? Practically, what does that look like in our lives? Well, hey, let's keep going with this passage, and we're gonna see two specific challenges that I want us to apply this week based off of the remaining verses. So let's pick up again here in verse 7. It says this: "It is right for me to feel this way about all of you, since I have you in my heart, and whether I am in chains or defending and confirming the gospel, all of you share in God's grace with me. God can testify how I long for all of you with the affection of Christ." So part one of carrying on is this: link arms. You know, as I was thinking about this morning, what came to mind was this idea that was used a lot in more medieval and ancient warfare of a shield wall. I don't know if you've seen this, but it's more of a Roman and Greek concept, but I actually was watching a movie from Bollywood recently where they had some shield walls like this. But essentially what would happen was that they would take these shields, they would line them up next to each other, and in some societies they actually had a function where the shields could lock in together, and as these soldiers would lock up together like this, they would link their shields together, they would touch their shields together, and sometimes link their arms together so that as forces rushed at them, they would hit the wall, and because they were linked up together, they could not be toppled, they could not be overcome. So this idea of linking arms from a war standpoint is a partnership, is leaning on people, it's a trust in one another, it's a collective strength of a group of people that allows them to overcome an obstacle. You see, this church in Philippi that we're talking about, we actually mentioned this in the first one of our videos. We were talking about the church in Philippi that came as a result of, we believe, the Philippian jailer. Paul and Silas are in jail, the Lord sends an earthquake, all the cell doors open up, but instead of leaving, they stay, and in the midst of trying to kill himself, Paul and Silas cry out to this jailer and say, no, don't do this. And because of the radical actions that they took, the jailer and his entire family were saved and had a relationship with the Lord. They were all baptized shortly after. We believe this is the foundations of the church that started in Philippi, and this is potentially one of the first churches that Paul planted. And this is a group of people that Paul has a deep relationship with. This is a group of people that he cares for deeply, and he draws strength off of that relationship. Because of how much he cares for them, because of how much he loves them, because of his relationship with them, they draw strength off of one another. And here's just a simple question to you. Can the same be said about your relationships with fellow believers? Can the same be said about the relationships that you have with your friends in this youth group? Can the same be said about the relationships that you have with the students in your life group? Well, wherever you sit on that spectrum today, whether you're saying, yeah, that's me, I feel that, or I don't know if I feel that. No, these relationships are built. Relationships are a process, and it's something that you can always work on. So here's challenge number 1. It is not good for you to be alone, so don't be alone. You see, we are incredibly fortunate to have phones, internet, laptops, Zoom, Skype, whatever you want to use. We have abilities, and we have softwares, and we have programs that can connect us together. I have a buddy who is a church planter in South Asia, and one of their biggest problems is one of the people they're trying to reach out to right now don't have access to these things. And they're in a harsh government quarantine. And so they're trying to overcome ways of being able to reach people without being able to legally go to them. But we are fortunate that the majority of people in our country have access to these things. The majority of your friends have access to these things. You most likely have access to these kind of things. So you have the ability to reach out and to connect with someone. So here's challenge number 1. Pick one person today and reach out to them. Send them a text. Send them a message on Instagram. Make a Zoom call with them or Skype with them. Play Super Smash Bros. With them over Nintendo Online. Find some way to meaningfully connect with someone, to reach out, to ask them how they're doing, and to honestly share how this experience has been for you. And this is about them, but it's also about you. You need to be with others. You do not need to be alone. Isolation will tear you apart. So let's take advantage of the blessings we have and reach out to people. So that was challenge number 1. Reach out to someone. We got to link arms. Here's the next part. We're going to pick back up in verse 9, and then I promise we're done. It says this, "And this is my prayer, that your love may abound more and more in knowledge and depth of insight, so that you may be able to discern what is best and may be pure and blameless for the day of Christ, filled with the fruit of righteousness that comes through Jesus Christ, to the glory and praise of God." Here's the next part. Is Paul is challenging the Philippians to dig deep. Paul is challenging them to really get down in there and make some stuff happen. His prayer is not for them to gather together in a building more. His prayer is not for them to just have some more head knowledge about something. His prayer is one of depth for them. It's not one of what's on their face. It's one of diving in deep and discovering more about the Lord. You see, as we seek to carry on in love, it's depth, not emotion, that keeps us grounded. I was reading this morning in Psalm chapter 121, and the psalmist is asking the Lord that he would keep him from slipping, that he would shore up his feet, that he would give him, literally, it's almost like he's asking for traction as he's coming up against trials and stuff. He doesn't want to slip, he doesn't want to fall, he doesn't want to be knocked over. He wants the Lord to keep his feet set. See, as we grow in our depth, as we grow in depth in our knowledge and insight of God, that is when we gain the strength to carry on. We gain discernment of the circumstances that are around us. We understand why things are going on. We have more of a grasp of the situation. We have better perspective of what's going on around us. And we also grow in our likeness of Christ. See, Paul here writes that we would be filled with the fruit of righteousness that comes through Jesus Christ alone. Part of walking with Christ is becoming more like Christ, becoming an ambassador of Christ, living out in our likeness of Christ as a new creation of Christ. We begin to grow in our likeness of Him. So here we go. Challenge number 2. If you're anything like me, when your rhythm is disrupted, everything gets thrown out of jack. Like everything gets thrown all over the place. You don't know what's going on. And typically for me, this was kind of like during the summer when I'd be done with school and I don't have that like scheduled time when I'm going to class anymore to really kind of structure my day around. And I'd get there and I'd have a full day where I could just do nothing. And I wake up at 12 o'clock and then I just completely miss out on having my God time for the day. So as our rhythm of life gets shifted, so do the rhythms of our life get shifted. So here's the challenge to you. You have more time than you probably did before, but it's probably harder to make something of it. So you have to make a more conscious and direct effort to spend time with the Lord. So here's my challenge. Use this time to spend time with God. Wow, that's crazy, right? No, that's simple, but it's profound and it will change your life. You see, we've got resources on our website. We have a daily reading plan for you to be working through. And it's simple. It's one passage, 2 questions each day. But it's enough to get you started on spending time with the Lord. And you're saying, well, Thomas, I don't know, I haven't read my Bible in like a month and a half. Hey, start today. Start tomorrow. Oh, Thomas, I don't know if I can really do that stuff. I get bored so easily. Yeah, so do I. You've got to start something. You've got to work at something before it becomes a habit, before it becomes a rhythm in your life. If you're looking for something more, if you're looking to take it to the next level, hey, reach out to me. Reach out to your life group leader. We'd love to talk through a personal plan for you on how to read Scripture. Guys, I don't really care if you use our plan or somebody else's plan, or if you come up with your own plan, or if you reach out to us to help me make a plan. What I'm asking, what I'm challenging you to do is to take seriously your time with the Lord, to take seriously this season, and not to just sit there and wallow and fade away in isolation, but to dig deep, to press in and grow in your depth in the Lord. He's giving you this season of time for a specific reason, and I think one of the reasons He's given it to you is so that you can grow in your depth. All right, I don't want to point any fingers, but somebody forgot to put their phone on silent before we started, and I don't have a phone on me, so you can guess who that was. But in closing, guys, we want this to be a beneficial season for you. We want this to be a season of growth. We want this to be a season of a deepening of your relationship with Jesus Christ. So if you have any questions on any of this stuff that we talked about today, please reach out to me, your life group leader. We would love to help you work on a plan on how to set you up for good God time habits and for depth of growth in your life. Just because you're quarantined doesn't mean you're stuck. God has a great plan for you in this season, and He wants to see incredible things happen in your life. I'm excited to see how He uses you. Students, I love you, and we'll see you soon.